Welcome to another edition of our series ASAM Fun with Standards. Today I have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Ralf Nörenberg, CEO of HighQSoft and member of the board of directors at ASAM. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Marius. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming. HighQSoft is a founding member of ASAM, and this means you have been, or HighQSoft has been involved more or less since 1998, and your company has contributed a lot to our association in terms of the standardization itself, but also now in your role as director of ASAM. When we look at standardization, your key topic is data management, and this would mostly affect the standards ASAM MDF and ASAM ODS. So let's get started. Let's not lose any time. Everyone is curious to hear what you're going to say about ODS. So you've been around ODS and standardization for a long time. How has that conversation changed, and what have been the major events for you?
Okay, in this case I would also stick to ODS, which was actually one of the founding standards of ASAM in this regard. I actually didn't participate everything since '98, whereas I actually was a working student at HighQSoft at the time.
You look younger than ASAM, so that's okay.
So I think at first, or the majority of the first half was actually about was about ownership. How do I consolidate all the different data sets I have, which could be different formats provided by different suppliers, and maybe even working with different tools only the supplied tool. How can I consolidate this in a meaningful manner so that I first have a long-term storage, still keep the meaning, and actually be independent of each single supplier, which I guess over the course of time may even change. So we were more about how to consolidate these data. At the time, I think it was mostly department level data management, and working with the different data sets, whereas the data sets, I guess, is somewhat the content of a file plus extra information and tool integration. I think then a bigger change as a second event, or the first event, was the migration to an HTTP API, which widened the field. The entrance barrier was smaller, so a lot more engineer or IT people could actually work with the standard or obtain information from the server. At the same time, the scaling of the system was much easier, because previously we had a callbar dependency, which in that regard was quite tricky. And with HTTP, the server is nothing but an HTTP service, so runs anywhere, can be accessed from anywhere, so that made it actually quite accessible. I think that was shortly after, followed by the big data discussion, which I guess was present in any domain, so around the 2010s, more or less.
Where there was actually a first question: does the standard survive? Can we still apply this, or does big data win everything? Truth is, it was a very stressful time, but now it's a commodity. The service runs containerized in the cloud, can be scaled. So whether you scale access to the data or actually the analysis, that with the information provided works directly on the data set, it's a commodity, so it's integrated sort of in each other. And I guess now we have another major event with AI, which I assume we will talk about a little more, where we have a similar discussion again. And I guess it will change a lot more how we work with the data, for sure, whereas we might not know how that will exactly be in future or in 5 years.
Perfect. Let's reiterate on this point. So let's talk about data management and generative AI. I think a common thought today is that AI can make supposedly sense of anything. The big question is that true, and how do you see the role of standardization in data management in that new landscape?
Yeah, okay. First, AI, or in that sense LM, can make sense of a lot of things, for sure. I think we need to separate two things. So first of all, for standardization, we talk about an industry context, and maybe not the services context where I try to derive an idea or do an ideation more quickly and get a lot of inputs. So we are not working with probabilities so much. So I think AI is also very strong if I work as a single person on my laptop on a problem, even if it's coding, that's for sure. But our standards, especially ODS, are actually also used by multiple parties, which could be a supplier, a main company, and that actually also supplies to, let's say, for an OEM. And there you can see that the meaning of data and the contract between those companies, that this meaning is understandable for all. This is the standard. So this is, even in big data, it remained the same. And I have the strong opinion that this will also be the case with AI. And second, AI itself changes how we will process the data in future. And this will radically change. But this is more or less on how we interact with the data that has a meaning and is based on a contract. And I think that both will actually coexist because, especially if you look into processes, we're in a regulated industry. We need to make sense, keep traceability, and so on. So there will be the need for the meaning of the data, whereas AI is then, I guess, mostly used for analysis, for example.
What are the data management requirements in the regulated industry that you mentioned? So automotive, aerospace, and well, you name it. What does AI mean for them?
Yeah, I think the main difference is I always internally for myself distinguish between the services and the industry. So in a lot of what we see with ChatGPT, for example, what we hear is about ideation and creating text and so on. And in the industry we are here, it's more about streamlining processes, yes, making them intelligent, but it's not that you replace the whole process with AI, I think. First of all, if you look into the ASAM MDF standard, we have time series data. It's quite a complex construct in itself on how the data is presented, how the meaning is put into the different elements in that regard. And also MDF is a container file format, so every company or every provider can do it slightly different. And then even though the meaning is slightly aligned, it's very hard to actually understand everything at once. And the LLM would probably fail every now and then doing this. And if we put on top what ODS does is also the whole meaning on why something was recorded and all the dependencies on why that result was coming out of an automation system or a vehicle. So it gets quite complex. So I think it's about also having a true result and trusting the data. So I think what the LLM uses should be the right information pulled from a data set and not something put on probability. So I think the focus might actually be using it for analysis on the correct information that you retrieved. And this would also help you with two other things, because you also need to probably, if you do record a lot of data every day or even in an hour, it's also about cost and automation. So you might not want to run everything through an LLM or AI, depending on what you do, but also apply it to certain points that are critical, which saves time and money, and also incorporate into some automation that helps you run through all the data sets.
Thank you. Another question that arises in the context of AI and data management is data lakes, not to be confused with big data we already talked about. Could a data lake already be sufficiently structured for AI use? And what are the benefits of an ASAM ODS system in this context?
I would separate this into two questions. I mean, first of all, what is an ODS system versus a data lake? So an ODS system is kind of an expert system for a certain domain, in this case, measured data. And if you're a bigger corporate, you can say maybe you have many of these expert systems. Maybe not measured data, but for multiple things. I mean, you could even say SAP is an expert system for other purposes. And in some decision making, so the idea of a data lake is that you put all the data into one service or one provider, which is of more generic nature. And the idea here is that now you can use AI with certain layers that are on top to access this information in a whole. So there's a very generic versus the expert view on data. And especially if you take maybe MDF files or ASAM MDF files or Parquet files, you can put time series data into one of the data lakes, so this works. But then again, you do lose a meaning to a degree, which is exactly what ASAM ODS provides. And here I can say, if you take a regular software leveling, so the first level is the AI, which is the consumption layer of information, which is the one that will radically change. The data lake is the lowest one, which is the, I guess, physical storage to a degree. And ODS is more or less the interface layer that actually also provides the meaning to the consumption layer and can potentially actually federate information that is in a data lake. So I think if you have simple time series data for a use case, data lakes will work, but to a degree you will reinvent building up the meaning first. Second, you don't have a stable API for a tool chain to evolve. And third, you might actually be dependent on one vendor and a cost model, so to speak, which might even be political in the end. So standardization is actually also key for the AI layer to access the information which could potentially be in a data lake. And if you will, an ODS system could even federate data partially in the data lake, partially somewhere else, and just combine that and give you a consolidated information about all data sets.
We had a talk in preparation for this interview, and you argued that standardization actually decides who gets to use AI first. That's an interesting statement, and can you explain it a little bit to us, what it means and how that is so?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It actually goes back to the two arguments made earlier where I say, okay, one thing is applying a very dynamic process on my desktop versus having actually processes with automation. And maybe using ODS as a standardization to already have the meaning presented, because if I want to automate a process, I maybe have a validation or an analysis that I run as soon as the data set appears. And for that, if I apply logic with AI or analysis, it's much, much easier to get to your final end result if all data is already consolidated, has a context, and you can apply the purpose of your transformation with AI much, much quicker. Because otherwise, if you don't, you start exactly where you left off with different file formats. You have a lot of transformations, maybe a few mishappenings. So if you look to further develop your system or integrate AI, in that case, the ODS standard is helpful.
Sounds clear to me. I hope, especially to our audience, it's also fully clear. But still, I think we could elaborate a little bit more on whether all three, like AI, data lakes, and ASAM ODS, interact with each other. Is this competition or is it complementary, what we see there?
And for all fairness, it's both. I think as I structured it before and with the three layers, I think the data lake will become a commodity where I guess some people will prefer this for a single project. But as soon as you have multiple sources, it becomes a commodity where ODS as the implementation will federate the information there. So I think the standard itself will plays a very beneficial role on the interface level. I guess there's a question whether the standard can actually also do some more homework on how to provide additional context or actually utilize some of the features data lakes provide. So I'm thinking of petabytes of time series data as one example, which I'm using for understanding usually, because everybody knows what it is, that you can actually run through or analyze single channels with a lot of data very quickly. This is actually, I guess, some homework for the standardization to do to provide this feature of maybe a specific or general data lake into the API, but I think that's not rocket science to do. So I think there's a good coexisting, and data lakes might even be beneficial then. On the AI part, I think the consumption layer will fully change. We can see we have a lot of applications that are, let's say, rich clients for analysis. We see a revival of Python. We need to make ODS more accessible. It's HTTP. We can also see Python tools evolving around here. We see MCP servers. So here there will be a change on who uses an ODS server. And I guess at some point we will not say I will query an ODS server, but I will use it as TCP/IP. Similar, it's there, provides the meaning, but maybe I don't really interact with it directly. And I don't think that's neither good or bad. It's an advancement, and I think that's a good role to have.
You mentioned standardization will have to do some homework, but you highlighted the context of AI and the use of standardized accesses. Let me try to pin you down. Is there a real risk to standards coming from AI, or what is it?
Yes, of course. We need to look at both sides. I do think there's some risk. For once, standardization is slow compared to regular development, and now what we can see, especially in the development of AI and the tooling that came out just this year or in the first quarter of 2026, it's amazing. So the pace is much higher. And I can see, even in times now with companies being under pressure, it might just be easier to do a shortcut, to use some tooling, get to the goal very quickly and maybe throw it away, or identifying where you use maybe an AI to develop a standard that becomes a quasi-standard, so to speak, which kind of jeopardizes the contract we're trying to achieve here at ASAM between different stakeholders. So I think pace of standardization might be a risk, or where we say we must increase the pace, which could be reflected in maybe on how we derive the standards or how we set the goals, or I mean even simpler, as we discussed in the technical steering committee today, is how we present standards. Currently some are just provided as a PDF file, which are of little use because nobody's going to read it anymore. So we need markup files. They should be curated from our organization potentially, or we even provide an MCP server or a chatbot that actually provides the information that people want to know, or even coding skills for, let's say, access to ODS or MDF as an example.
You mentioned it, even AI could maybe produce standards by itself. But this would mean it's more like even if created by AI, a proprietary solution. So here at ASAM, we work on open standards, which does not mean that every standard is freely available, but that there is an access to these standards. And why does it matter whether open standards or proprietary platforms ultimately win the race?
I think that is a good question again, and it matters more and more these days, because I think standardization, as I said, are a contract between parties that agree on something, and this is accessible. Even if you didn't participate, you can buy the standard, or maybe it's publicly available so you can use it. And this helps even, let's say, small and mid-sized companies to be part of the development cycle or part of the domain and actually develop their own solution or further develop a solution. And if we don't have this, the access might be limited to a few big players who then own the AI or the tooling, including all the data or just the data lake. And we'll soon face the risk that this is a game not everybody can play, only the big ones. And this is actually exactly what standardization tries to resolve to begin with, the dependency. And I mean, it's not about even accessibility in that sense, but we have the same discussion now with the AI or the LLMs themselves, because it might even be a political game. Who has access to that and how expensive will it be, right? So I think it's the importance to have the standard and to have an independency to certain entities or groups, so to speak.
So is this ultimately a question of sovereignty?
Yeah, in the end, you can say it's one. Because, I mean, in the end, to say you use a data lake and use an AI model of one vendor, you basically gave up a lot of the ownership you have or the claim. So you might want to use it, you might want to use it to a degree, but you might want to also be sovereign and interchangeable. And this is exactly about contract again. So we have the interface level, and yes, you're free on where you store the data and what you use as a consumption layer, but in general, you want to have the same contracts to be in place no matter what your decision is.
So let's look ahead a little bit. Where is this going over the next few years, and especially for the standard ASAM ODS itself, or standards in general?
Yeah, I think we addressed some of the tasks that we have to do in, I think, generally maybe developing standards or presenting standards to members or the public. The pace for ODS itself, I think it's actually quite well prepared because it has that middle layer. I think maybe the positioning is important. And yeah, I guess more actively looking at some of the features that like the data lakes provide, like accessibility or node transformation, transport of information to the client. So there are a few things that are actually interesting to look at, which would be part of the natural development cycle. But I guess now we can also take decide to increase the urgency on this because we need to react a bit quicker. But I think the standardization itself is rather secure in that area if we decide to do this as a group or as the members to carry that forward.
Mm-hmm. If we look in particular at ASAM ODS, which is one of the, let's say, not oldest, but longest serving standards, it's constantly being maintained at ASAM. Is ASAM ODS ready for the AI shift, or is there major change needed, like a reinvention of the standard?
No, I don't think a reinvention, because I mean you can see also on, for example, on public papers where people try to use data lakes and they end up reinventing a part for exactly their project. So it looks like we did the right thing, at least in the modeling. I think we need to look at extending the API maybe to a little bit to incorporate new features such as the mass data access, for example. And I guess now that we have a very strict separation of an SQL database, where in the past a lot of Oracle was used and now it's slowly shifted to cloud and Postgres, and we have a file storage because that's actually very important. We separate the meaning or description from actually the data. And there we, I guess, need to be more flexible in adapting to newer technologies. But in the end, where data is stored doesn't matter so much, or should not matter in future. Maybe we won't use an SQL database anymore. But I don't think that's a major change in the ODS as a standard, because if you also separate the benefits, there's actually always two paths, because always engineers ask, what are the benefits for me? I always tell them, well, first, it's about ownership and the value of data that you can access over a long time. And you build up a tool chain that lasts and is reliable. So that's actually something that for you as an engineer is more work to begin with, but the value or the benefit is for the enterprise. And only then, if you go into automation and trying to apply, let's say, analysis with AI, then it's a benefit for the engineers, but that comes second. So I think we're all set up for this.
Perfect. And I think it also reflects what we have seen in the past, that even the technology references that were coming with ODS changed over time. And so it's more like an evolution than a revolution that we currently need.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they ask me, but ODS is old. And I always say, yes, 25 years theoretically, but we cover every use case around measured data and physics. And yes, physics evolved as well to a degree, but not in the domain we work with, right? And this basically stays the same. What varies are technologies, and a lot of people still think we're doing Corba. And whenever they hear ODS server, it's that clunky thing. But again, it's just an HTTP service that runs anywhere. So if you implement your own solution, you basically do the very same thing.
For the people in our audience who want to dig a little bit deeper into standards and AI, what would you recommend?
Well, the easiest, use your preferred chatbot. Just go in the internet, turn on web research, and I think even if you put in ASAM MDF and ASAM ODS, there's a lot of information that's publicly available already to introduce you to the content, really, or even allow you to do simple programming exercises even on MDF, for example. So, and I think that's just the best way to get into, and then try for yourself and see whether the benefit for you as the engineer and the enterprise is given. And then, of course, join ASAM to also broadcast your interests and help us further develop the standards.
Joining ASAM means usually you have an high interest in contributing to a standard, but contributing means it takes time.
Right.
You spend a lot of time in the ASAM organization itself, but also in the standardization projects. So what keeps you motivated? I mean, personally and as the company?
Yeah, personally, I think it's important work. I think that's a decision you have to make for yourself. Of course, you also meet nice people and see people that work in your domain that may have a similar or opposite view on things, and that actually is quite helpful and healthy. I think important to say is that we are in a pre-competitive arrangement here, so we can talk, and yes, our implementations then in the market actually do compete, which is fine and ever since worked, I think, even across standards, not just ODS. Second, I mean, as a company, for us as a mid-sized enterprise, we see the benefits of developing one solution or one product that we can sell to multiple customers. So that's actually the incentive, that we can sell a product instead of doing the work every time again for every project. And for the customers who are maybe then an OEM, it's simpler. They can buy a product without having to contract for a new solution for each department. So it's quite a beneficial environment for all companies that join. And I guess we have around, I think, 40 plus standards now. So there's even different topics to address. And I think overall it's been a good success story overall.
So the ROI is given for you.
Yeah, so to speak.
We're almost done, and in case we have to cut down this interview to a very short teaser, give me a single line. What does standardization mean in the age of AI?
Yeah, so I would say something that goes in both directions. I would say when AI comes for test data, standardization amplifies. This goes both ways. I think standardization is very helpful to use AI and boost it, but also it's vice versa. AI boosts us because ODS over time, it's not that easy. You can start simpler yourself, but then again, the complexity includes all use cases, and AI will be a big boost to that standard because AI will exactly solve that for us in near future, I would even say, or it does even now. Yeah.
All right, and now we have to go to the final question. Usually it was always the question, how do you feel in a vehicle that was developed using ASAM standards? Now we do it a little bit differently because time is, evolving, technology is evolving. How does it feel to use an AI assistant when you know the data underneath is standardized? ASAM standardized.
ASAM standardized. Yeah, I feel much safer because I know the analysis was done on the right set of information.
Thank you very much, Ralf,
thank
for
you for
these insights into AI. We have to confirm Ralf was not AI generated. All of this interview is not AI generated. We are real people here in our office in Nörenkirchen. Thank you very much for watching this edition of Fun with Standards. And stay tuned for the next one coming up. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you, Marius.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.